Ladies and gentlemen, with a warm round of applause, let's welcome Professor Heppell for his keynote address.
Well, thanks very much. What an extraordinarily exciting time it is for learning. I loved the session yesterday evening. I thought your Vice President was so good. I want to take him home. He's better than our politicians, I think. The bar is perhaps low, but we've got a lot to cover in a tiny amount of time, and so let's get started and say a few things about myself. Although looking around the audience, lots of familiar faces. People, gosh, we've seen each other often enough. But I go back a long way. Projects from history. Gosh, this was an online community of school learners in the 1980s. I'm very old. This was inventing the CD-ROM for education. I was briefly the largest producer of CD-ROM in Europe. It was rather good, as nobody else was doing it, really. And this project with Tesco, our big supermarket chain, was at the time in the Guinness Book of Records as the biggest internet learning project in the world. So I've got a bit of history in all this. And as I look around the world, I'm lucky enough to be involved in building some remarkable schools. This one Limfield in New South Wales. It was me just 4 or 5 weeks ago. Always pleased I'm not wearing the same shirt, it's a relief, But Limfield is a stage, not age school, where they don't have any horizontal limits at all. You can go as fast as you like. If you're a smart 8-year-old and you want to work with the 13-year-olds, up you go and get on with it. It's curious, that artificial capping of ages. It took 5 years to open this school, a lot of controversy, great support from government ministers, but there was a feeling that parents wouldn't want to risk going to a school, so many new ideas in it, and so it only opened in January, and I think you can see there from the newspaper report, already within one term, 3,000 extra children on the waiting list, and the school was full. It opened full with 3,000 more, actually 3,000 families, not children, more than that. So I have a lot of fun with all this. I do learning for the British Olympic team. I know you love hockey, so we're going to look in a bit more detail at learning in sport. But if you love hockey enough, you'll know that those girls won a gold medal in Rio, and they'd never been on the podium before. I'm a granddad. Here we are. I live with my granddaughters, live with me. And it's interesting that this was just a few days ago. Little Emily, she won't leave school until, what year? She's 3 years old at the moment. So you're well into the, it'll be 1935, 2035 before she leaves school. 2035. It's a long way, isn't it? And if we'll even have schools to leave them, she stays at university, be even longer. I get to look at technical innovation in the movies. So I'm a BAFTA judge. I get to walk down the red carpet with movie stars. This is my wife. When you're not very famous, you have to take your own photographs, you understand? And she took me, But you look at the way cinema is changing, and look at the way so much of our lives are changing. It's a pretty exciting time. This is, I won't tell you which country it is, although to be honest, you can guess from the clothes, but this is where education goes wrong a little. The KPI in this country is for how many computers have you got per child. And lots of computers, but you can see no power. So they ticked the box for have we got enough computers, but when I was there, they'd been there for 2 years and nothing had been turned on because it couldn't be turned on. So, it isn't about KPIs and targets, it is about learning and all the things your wonderful Vice President said last night. Value for many, not value for money, was his memorable phrase amongst others. So that's me. It's enough of me, really. We'll come to more of this in a bit. Let's take you on a journey. And I'm going to go on several journeys, and they all sort of lead to the same place. So I'm going to begin with the journey in sport. Because British sport, pretty poor historically. I think in the Atlanta Olympics, we won 1 gold medal. Britain is very good at sports where you sit down. You probably realise this. We're very good at sitting sports, cycling, rowing, horse riding, Formula One. If you sit down, we're top nation. As soon as we stand up, it all goes to pieces. But of course, that's not the case anymore. And if I look at the data, there was Atlanta with that 1 gold medal, there's Rio. And I'm old enough to remember the name of all our gold medalists through history, because there weren't very many. Atlanta is Pinson to Redgrave. But I couldn't tell you the 27 gold medalists from Rio because there are too many. So what's happened in that time? I don't think it's diet. Our diet's pretty bad. Well, what's happened is data and learning. And if I look at football, for example, soccer, Liverpool currently leading the Premier League in England, and Ian, who heads up their data, as you can see, is pretty well qualified. If I go to Manchester City, won the league last year, they've got 11 full-time data analysts watching as the teams are playing. Full-time is what they do. If I go to rugby, I work with the England rugby squad. We nearly won the World Championship, but if you look on the back of the shirts of all the players, you can see that's a data. This is playing full, this is during the final. Everywhere they go, we have data from them. So an interesting question, which we'll come back to, is what data do we have from learning? What do we know about our students? Not enough. And if you were listening to Brianna last night talking about big data and quantitative analysis and algorithms and quantum computers, you'll know that data is going to be hugely important in our learning lives. Let's look at what happened in hockey. This was the training headquarters, the coaching room for the Team GB Olympic hockey team. And it's not unfamiliar if you've seen classrooms with children all sitting in rows looking at really rather poor screens in fairly dingy rooms. This is the demountable room. It's a temporary accommodation, and they never wanted to go in there to learn. So I spent quite a lot of time with them, and this is what it looks like now. And you know what? It looks like a good primary classroom from some of the front-running schools and regions around the world. Let's look at the details a little and remind ourselves of the complexity of all this, because what we've learnt working with learning in sport is that the aggregation of marginal gains, every little detail, makes a difference. So here you can see the walls are all writable surfaces. I can write everywhere, not because it's cute, but because we know that learning is a social activity, and learning in front of others, sharing your learning, you're writing on the wall, I'm looking and going, oh, he's good, looking over your shoulder. I remember those moments. If I copy into my exercise book, I remember nothing. So, of course, every surface a writable surface. There's some direct instruction happening here. So I want the students all to be very close to me. I mean, some of you guys are already a long way away in the distance. Hello. How are things at the back? Lonely. These guys are all very close together because we've designed the seating to be tiered, you'll remember from your science lessons as a child that when the science teacher wanted to really get your attention, so you didn't accidentally drink the sulfuric acid thinking it was a mouthwash, well, it'd probably work, but the consequence is not so good. You come up with your stool, you sit right in front of the science teacher, eye-to-eye contact, as closer than we are here. And we're pretty intimate at the front, but closer than that even. The teacher here, he's a bloke, so we've had to teach him to not interfere. So this is half the room laughed at that point. So we've had to teach him to put his hands in his pockets and stand back, because otherwise his arms will be out, he'll be interfering, and what's happening here is they're talking about penalty corners, they're thinking about set pieces, she's trying to solve a problem that's been set, the others are watching, she's picking things up and putting them down because that hard wires straight into the cerebral cortex, the act of doing that. When you're in your hotel room, if you're visiting here at the moment, you put something on the table beside the bed, you wake up in the middle of the night, you reach out and your hand goes straight to your glass of water or your phone perhaps these days. There's a tight memory between the physical act of this and the taxonomy of objects in your head. And also, they're working on a big map of the working on the pitch works so well. When the team travel on a plane, they open out the seat on the plane, they get out a little pitch, they put it down, they carry on working. And if you know hockey, you'll know these guys got through to the final on set pieces. They won the final on heroic penalty shootout, but they got there on the things they'd learnt in that space. So we learn heaps from hockey, but also they have these wonderful thinking Thursdays. I'm not going to read from the screen to you. Yeah, I hate that. But you can see the way a thinking Thursday works. You turn up, and oh my goodness, the goals are on the side of the pitch, so you've now got a very short, very wide pitch, and you need to think on your feet and think, how am I going to do that? How do my tactics work now? I'm a winger, well, the wing's a long way away. We don't have thinking Thursdays enough in schools. Children walk through the door faced with certainty. They're going to sit in a room with a seating plan. They're going to be, you'll be sat next to the same person all year in some cases. You cannot run out of things to say well before Christmas. How's your dog? Still dead? Okay. How's your dad? Oh, still gone. There's not much more to say. Surprise is necessary, as you heard your Vice President and for that matter Brianna say last night, because your students are going out into a world full of surprises, full of volcanoes erupting in New Zealand that weren't supposed to be, full of economic war between America and China that nobody was expecting, full of new inventions. We're probably 20 years from turning back the clock on age-related degradation of our bodies. What does that do to the world when suddenly anybody can start reversing their aging? So the world's full of surprises, and if your students are going to cope with surprises, they need to be surprised in their learning. And we'll look at how all that can happen in a minute. There's enough on, almost enough. I'm also working with Real Madrid Football Club. If you follow soccer, you'll know that. But when we started, no social media on this, but that was their learning space when we started, just a classroom. And if you follow soccer, you'll notice they haven't been very good on their set pieces. They haven't been solving problems during the matches. They're great skills, but that's all they've got. And you watch that turn around in the next 18 months or so. So that's a journey from sport that leads us to know that the aggregation of those marginal gains is fabulous and effective. But technology's been on a journey as well. I'm not going to labour this, you heard it well enough last night, but some of you will remember some of these technologies. Look, I'm old enough to remember slide rules, and some of you might be. But it had to be the right slide rule. If I turned up with the wrong slide rule, there was no, you can't use that, it's the wrong one. And then it was calculators. This is entirely the wrong calculator. This does reverse Polish logic rather than arithmetic logic, so it gets the right answer, but in the wrong way. So the school would say, don't use that, you have to use the right piece of equipment, and so on with computers. As we pass this line, the technology has gone from being something that we decree it will be like this to something that is simply what the students have in their hands, in their pockets, on their... I was part of the Google Glass development project, which was heaps of fun. A pair of glasses that combine data with the view of the world. And I used to love sailing my boat at night, just looking up at the stars and seeing every star labelled in my glasses. It was the most lovely thing. Imagine on playground duty, you have the name of every child in your glasses, and and their homework maybe results, and watches. It's very funny. Victoria State in Australia has just banned mobile phones. Nobody can have a mobile phone in the club. I don't know what they were thinking, but they banned them. But the kids have all got watches anyway. Hey, Mum, they've just banned mobile phones. The phone's in your watch, is in your glasses, is in your pocket, is in your earrings. You can't ban this stuff. And actually, funny enough, I was in a class in south of England, in Dorset, and it was a mixed age class, and most of my schools have mixed age, and some boys were looking at a video of giraffes swimming in a swimming pool. It was a cartoon, and they were saying, I wonder if giraffes can swim. And they called over to this little girl who's on the other side of the class, big class, 96 kids in the class. Hey, Amelie, can giraffes swim? And she's about 5 years younger than them. They were just coming up to leaving primary school. She's in her second year. And she goes, hey, Siri, can giraffes swim? And they called to her because they knew she had the watch on. Simple as that, Of course. So technology's been on a heck of a trip. But where it is now is very interesting, because my life with technology, the history of technology, was always, here's a technology, how might we use it to do what we're already doing? How can we write better? Now we can edit. How can we spell better? Now we have good spelling. Oh, half time. I feel allowed to change ends in some way. Hope there's oranges, Thank you. Now technology is saying to us, you know what, you can do anything you like. Anything you like. What would you like to do? That's very different from, can technology help my children learn telling the time? Can technology help my children with their maths? You heard from Brianna last night about adaptive testing, where you start doing an answer and the computer notices you're good at maths but you're bad at calculus, so it throws a lot more integration at you in the hope of perking that up, and it tests you on the things you're weak at. That's doing what we used to do before better. But the question is, and I'll come back to it at the end, what would you like to do? You really can do anything you like. Would you like, your Vice President said last night, would you like to look at those children who are outside of education? I mean, India's done an amazing job at raising the number of primary registered children. But you've still got tens of millions that are not completing secondary school. Is that what you want to do? Or do you want to have the best and the brightest? What do you want to do? Well, we'll come back to that, because when we start putting these things together, these aggregation of marginal gains and the power of technology, we suddenly find that the first thing we can do is do what we were already doing a lot better. Let's look at a couple of examples. Here are CO2 levels in a traditional classroom. So here we are in a school of 20-something children, I think 27 in Aldergrange, school in England. This is the CO2 in the classroom measured in ppm parts per million. And you can see here that the school day starts here and finishes there, so that's the school day. And you can see the children breathe. I mean, you hope. They breathe, and in goes oxygen, out goes CO2, and the CO2 levels in the room start to climb up. Of course, the door's shut, teachers teaching them, they're sitting at their desks. They go out for break here, and you can see the CO2 drops. But CO2 is a big, heavy gas. It just hangs around on the floor and waiting for them to come back. And then it keeps on mounting. By the time we get to lunchtime, you can see we're up to 4,000 parts per million. Now, at what point does the CO2 start to damage your brain's ability to think and learn? Well, we started this research over 5 years ago. We thought it was about 2,200. We thought the damage point was above there. We were wrong. It's just under 1,000. So for these children, they come into school, they register, and that's pretty much the last time they were at their best for the day. Now, this is in classrooms worldwide, unless you happen to be sitting outside under a tree, which is increasingly a good option. What do we do about that? Do the kids all come in with an oxygen mask and a bottle on their back? Do we have expensive air scrubbing? We don't need to do any of that because, look, plants are our friends. BYOP, bring your own plant, is sweeping the world at the moment. And if you're not following it all on Twitter, you should follow me on Twitter. You'll see all this stuff trickling along. But if every child brings their plants, 3 magical things happen. First of all, there's a husbandry job for them to do looking after the plants. Each child has their own plant. They name their plants. This is Monica. The plants are always in a white pot because the plants absorb light. In a minute, we'll talk about the impact of light on learning. This room is too dark for your brains. And so we want, as the plants absorb light, the pots reflect light. So putting them in the room is a neutral thing. In a little school in Islington, we had a boy who'd been an occasional school attender. He only turned up 3 days out of 5. Typically, occasionally 4, almost never 5. When he had his own plant, and by the way, the plants we've chosen, I'm doing work with NASA at the moment in the rocket people. And of course, NASA's thought about, well, if we're going to Mars, we're going to need to take plants with us because there's no oxygen on Mars. So all the breathing we do, we want to turn it back into oxygen. What are the best plants for that? And dear old NASA, of course, has published a list of the best plants. And one of them is aloe vera, which you know as for the gel for sunburn and other things. So this little lad had called his plant Vera, and every morning he'd walk in and say, "Hello, Vera," which he thought was very funny because it was he didn't get out much, But he comes 5 days a week because it's his plant, because he's looking after it, because he's responsible for it. And by the way, if you want to get into STEM activities, then you just get yourself an Arduino kit and build a little self-watering gadget and plug it in, and now the plants are doing a little bit of robotic work on their own life. And if you want to look at the data, what happens when we do all this? Sure, the academic performance goes up because the children are engaged with oxygen-rich brains. But interestingly, looking at this same set of data, look at the teacher's feedback on the children's behaviour. You can read it for yourself. Across the board, it's better. This is in Dubai, by the way, so hot, warm, dusty place. And we've done this in large numbers. Let's have a look at that Dubai project while we're here. So here's the Kajid Times, and they're reporting. We've built these little boxes that measure the environment for us, and we call them learnometers because it's a cute name, learnometer.net if you want to see the numbers. But you'll see here we did, where are we? I think it's something like 160-something classrooms. Yeah, here we go. Look, it's just there. So 162 classrooms. And across the board, dramatic improvement. By the way, ADHD dramatically reduced. Children who had an attention deficit, there was nothing wrong with them. I mean, some of them, of course. But mostly, struggling to pay attention in a room that was full of carbon dioxide, too dark. Well, let's look at some other little bits. This is IoT. This is the Internet of Things. This is big data. This is those two things coming together to make learning better. Let's pick another example. Let's look at movement. So we know that movement matters. Here's the data for it, these three classes. The class A are children who stay in their seats all day. Teachers come to them. The vertical axis here is a measure of attentiveness. This is time. So as time goes by, their attention falls, of course, because the heart that's pumping blood around their body isn't doing much work, so the oxygen isn't getting to their brains, and they feel themselves slipping away. The orange line here are children who taught a class, then the bell goes, they move, taught another class, they move. But the blue line are children who move within the class. So they move around. The classroom might be zoned. You do reading, you do collaboration, you do research, you do presentation, and you move within the room. So many zoned classrooms around the world now. And they all work. And other people are trying things like this is a Dutch classroom where they put in furniture where if you don't move, you fall off the chairs. They're simply not stable, doof, when you're gone. Or here's Thailand, a library where if you want to be a good reader, you've got to be a good climber, and up you go. Or we're building sensors into chairs at the moment, stress gauges, and we're looking at where kids' feet are. So I might say to you as a teacher, sit up straight and pay attention. And you might say, that's not what my chair's telling me. My chair's telling me I need to stretch out and walk around a bit. You see what I mean about the data? It's their data. And just as in sport and health and a million other places, they will be hungry to do better. There are some chairs, we designed these chairs. These days I run a company that makes furniture as well. These chairs are designed to be, if I'm a kid sitting in a chair, the school wants me to sit upright, but children always slump back like that. They try to get their bodies at about 120 to 130 degrees, because at that point, the blood flows best around your body. Children know this instinctively, and we say, sit up straight, put your arms on the table. They know that slouching is better for their brains. So, or we could look at, well, we haven't got time to look at all these. I'll be waving the sign at me again in a minute. Let's look at maths, How on earth can we make maths more engaging? Well, we know it goes in this way. We can dress the kids as binary numbers and having them, no, it's not 5 minutes. So it's more than that. It's past, we stop. You can't fool me. Here's a protractor door where I just open the door 30 degrees. Here are stairs where every stair gives you arithmetic progression, geometric, prime numbers, whatever you like. Here's a number algorithm tree in the playground, which is pretty fab. You've got to work out why the number is on which branch. Here's a clock where the kids are given the challenge of what are you going to do with a 3. That's pretty close to 3. It's not bad, That actually is 6 at the bottom. So this is all engaging the students. This is all engaging them in that collaborative journey. And I want to show you what that collaborative journey looks like. So here's a group of kids. We gave them a challenge of making over their own room, their own space. And it went pretty well. So here they are working with a group of children in Denmark. The London kids are on screen here, advising the Danish kids what to do in their room, which went pretty well. The kids had a hypothesis about where the best room for learning would be when they measured the light and temperature and CO2 and air pressure and sound rhythms and all the other things. And they got on with designing a better space. They built it themselves. You can see here they mashed up existing furniture. They've done this with a jigsaw. You can see they've stuck the edge on with sellotape. This is learner-led design. It's not doing it with the kids. The kids are leading the design. And on the door, oh yeah, and by the way, if we had time, we could look at the data. Performance got better, behaviour got better, the kids did better, they got more A's and less D's. And 5 years on, the new class came in and they were saying, well, we've inherited the dream classroom, but we're going to make it ours. So you don't do this once and say, that's it, we've improved the classroom. You know, it never stops. You do this and you do it again and you keep doing it. So we got those children, and it had worked so well that they made over their school. So the school said, gosh, the room those kids made worked so well, let's do the whole school. And I said, I'll tell you what, would you mind popping in and, here are the children, in a sense of the age. I said, would you mind popping into the university and designing the university for us? So this was a 2-day project. I gave them a lot of cardboard. They made over the furniture. They redesigned it. This is just a warehouse. But they knew what they wanted. I wasn't asking their opinion. I was asking their research. What do you know that's effective? What would it look like in a university? And, you know, it worked so well that we built it. And here it is. And still the warehouse. But look, there's the table that they built in cardboard. We've built for them. And cheaply, we did this with shop fitters. The stools were, they found a chair that wasn't very good. They took the legs off, put the legs on from a stool. So they mashed up the furniture themselves to make it even better. And, you know, it worked so well, I brought them into the university and said, I'll tell you what, would you mind making over one of the existing spaces? I love this photograph because you can see here, here's me, here are the school students, here's one of the university students, and here are colleagues in the university looking very doubtful about whether, you know, I don't think this is going to work. And of course, you know, here's the space afterwards that we made over. It's our most popular space for learning and teaching. I can't keep my colleagues out of it. With the details of the plants, with the privacy without secrecy spaces, with those chairs that work effectively, with even the little things like where we've got glass, there's a 5-degree angle on the glass, so sound is dissipated rather than reflected. Detail, 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 detail. And we know that all this works extraordinarily well. And the kids, of course, said, how will we help our colleagues in the university to learn to use it? And here is student-led CPD. So the children here, primary age children, are leading the professional development of the university lecturers, saying, oh, you can see them, they're little people here. They're saying, this is how you use the space. And they said, you know what, you'll need some help. So they 3D print all the furniture for the lecturers and say, before you teach in the space, here's an envelope with all the 3D furniture in it. Play with it over breakfast. Have a think about how you want to use the space while you're eating your toast and marmalade. So this is exciting stuff. And as we scamper on, I know time, 10 minutes left, I got it. As we scamper on, let's look at the implications of all this when we go to details. One of the things we've been looking at is food. You know, if I'm an Olympic athlete, I'm going to do a run, I eat pasta, I win a medal. If I'm a student, what do I eat on the morning of my big exam? What's the best breakfast for the most marks? And remember that when we change the room environment, I can pretty much guarantee you 3 to 5% on every child's mark across the school, just by getting the temperature, the light. I mean, the light here is really low. I guess we're sitting here in about 70 to 90 lux. I would not teach a child in a room less than 500 lux. I'm building schools to 1,500 lux, pure white light. Go to my website, heppell.net/lighting, you'll see all the numbers. But you know what, in a room this dark, anybody, I mean, look at these guys over here. They're practically in a, you know, it's an induced coma, isn't it, really? I mean, it's really hard really hard to focus in the dark over there. Even the brightest little pool of light here. Can you see the difference between faces in those two spaces right now? You know, the first yawn in the room came from over there, by the way. So, you know, you can predict it. So, what might the best food be? We've done the work on the best food, and if you follow me on Twitter, I'll tweet the list for you tonight. But here are the kids introducing their research to mums and teachers and saying, this is what we want to eat. We've struggled to get children to take well-being seriously with their diet. But the minute it's well-being of their brain, they're unstoppable. We've had parents saying, my son hasn't eaten anything green since he was 7. He's just come home, put the entire fridge in the bin. And he said, this food is terrible, you're making me stupid. They're really interested in this stuff. Look, it doesn't look very tasty. This was a conference we ran on making learning better. And we did brain food for the conference. It was a conference for children. And look at the table. When did you last go to a conference where all the food was eaten? Kids wolfed the lot, and when the food arrived, the kids were queuing up to get it as it was delivered from the kitchen. So the details here really, really, really matter. And you know, it doesn't have to be expensive. This was in Barcelona, where we said to the children, we want you to reinvent learning in your classroom, but we're going to give you a budget of no money. So we've tried all sorts of 500 euros, 5,000 euros, 20,000 euros. This lot had nothing. And they reinvented learning. You can see they've got an interactive board, but it's cardboard. They had 10 iPads, but 7 of them were cardboard. To our great amazement, the learning got better. And of course, when you think about it, you know why. Because the children were role-playing better learning. We've done children role-play all the time. They role-play being astronauts, they role-play being mums, they role-play being boyfriends and girlfriends, whatever. But here they were role-playing better learning. And it turned out pretending to learn better was better than the learning they'd been doing before. Of course, because sat in rows, in the dark, too hot, breathing the emissions from all the other children in the room is bound to be bad for your brain. So where does that leave India? In a very interesting place indeed, because you heard last night that there's a generation of youngsters that are, well, look, there was Brianna last night. You know, I love the way she was, oh no, I've stopped doing quantum computing now, I'm building robots, you know. Although it was funny that when somebody asked her from the audience, do you see a role for quantum computing in education? She said, just as her parents and teachers had said a generation before, no, I don't think there's a role for that. I don't think it'll be in schools. It was like, of course it will. But I was at a conference 2 weeks ago in Valencia where this little girl, Nunu, she's a 13-year-old in a township school in Soweto. By the way, having left a private school that her parents had put her in and said, I want to go back into the township school because the problems there are much more interesting than the ones I'm being given in the school my parents are paying for. And here she is on stage in Valencia leading a conference on new technologies in learning. And you start thinking, well, this is kind of interesting because here we are in NASA. This is the mission control for the moon landings, 1969, all those years ago, anniversary this year. And I mean, you can see it was a long time ago because look, there is that slide rule. There is that packet of cigarettes, you know, pair of binoculars to see the screen with, you know. Do you know what the average age was in mission control when the first people stood on the moon? 27. And quite a lot of them were very old. So most of the people in that room were barely 20. And we've forgotten how good our kids can be. And I've been fascinated to discover just how good they can be. My daughter runs a beach school, beachschool.org if you want to go there. She's got 4-year-old kids all over the beach where we live. We live by the sea, looking at animals, looking at plant life, looking at the science of where they live. Last night, your Vice President said how important it was to value and study your culture, your context, your flora and fauna, your science, your thousands of years of brilliant learning cultural history. That's what they should be studying. And it turns out you don't need a school to do it. I think rather excitingly, the kids discovered these jellyfish in a corner of the water near where they were studying. These aren't supposed to be in England at all. These are jellyfish from Sweden and Russia. They're very nasty. They sting you, it will hurt. You'll be in hospital for 2 or 3 weeks. We've had marine biologists pouring up to the town to see what they've discovered. They couldn't find the jellyfish, and the children said, "Oh, don't worry, we'll show you where they are." 4-year-olds leading PhD level scientists on, because they're doing the science of where they live. So I don't know, after 30 years a professor, I don't know how good our kids can be, but I do know it's a hell of a lot better than we've allowed them to be so far, and it needs to be. So what do? What does India do? I think 3 things, starkly. I got it, this is literally the last slide. 3 things. Firstly, you've seen those little micro experiments all around the world. Make every teacher in here, every head teacher, can go back today and start looking at the noise levels, the light levels, the pollution in their classrooms, say, how can we improve it? You could do it tomorrow with your kids, and they'll run round, trust me, they'll run round and survey the school. Secondly, you need those learning labs. You need a vision of what does learning look like in 2035 when my little granddaughter is leaving school. You need to build them. They're expensive things to build because you're building tomorrow's technology into today's spaces. But you've only got to build one. I'm building one in Riyadh. I built one in Madrid. You've only got to build one. And then your children, your teachers, your head teachers, your policymakers can say, that's where we're going. Not where are we going, but are we going that way roughly? And that's a hell of a good way of not wasting money. But lastly, oh, that's interesting. But lastly, time is up. Look, the internet's gone. But lastly, those children who are lucky enough to have no education, I repeat that, those children who are lucky enough to have no education, you haven't got to waste time trying to build a cheap facsimile of bad Western schools. You can go straight to the future. They've got no legacy. They've got no capital investment. You just go straight round it. So as me, I'd be heading for Kashmir with a lot of ambition and a little bit of money. And you know what? The only difference between Kashmir and the beach school my daughter runs is one lot of kids are sitting in the sand, led in their science by their parents and their grandparents and their community. The other lot are sitting on the sand waiting for opportunity. You can give them that opportunity. And I'll tell you what, those will be the kids that will solve the problems of the world. Those will be the kids that will pay your pension. Those will be the kids that will make the country and the world a more peaceful place. Thank you very much. Thank you.